So right now, the state of Israel, and there's really a question about, concept of state of Israel. But within the state of Israel is the land of Israel, which has a certain kedusha about it. Not a certain kedusha, there's a tremendous, tremendous kedusha about it. We have to understand how we got to the position that we're in right now, the state of war. And the midrashim and all the different ideas, you see this in other religions as well. You see the world tends to want to gang up against the Jews, especially the Europeans. And we've done tremendously evil things all over everywhere, but they're powerful. And ultimately, the fight between Iran and the Muslim world and the Jews is going to spread. And the situation is going to become very, very dire around the world. That's what the rabbis say. Now, is it going to be next week or tomorrow? Well, it's just a slow progression because the world takes 24 hours, a whole complete, going around the complete circumference of the world takes 24 hours. It's 24,000 mile, how we got to that number, I'm not sure, journey. What about the Jewish people? We have enemies. We've always had enemies. And somehow, we're still here. They're all against us. We have some friends. And we'll get more. We're in a time of the return of the exiled Jews to their land. It's a difficult time. I'm going to come over here and show some more things here in this book by the great Dr. CHAIM BEINART. And he has so many different things for us to see. Now, I'm going to not spend a lot of time on this page because I want to get to more history. But as you realize that the Jews, especially those living in Europe, but not just Europe, were very, very productive in terms of ideas and goodness, just bringing out tremendous amount of goodness. Now, of course, people are people, so all different kinds of people, but during the period of time when Europe the Jews were really ravaged in Europe over and over and over again, as we're about to see. And even so, we're very prolific in writing, in composing. So here we have, let's look first, I think down below is easier to start with. This is the amount of different writings and books, compositions that were created, Jewish compositions that were created in the worlds of Portugal and Spain, the Iberian Peninsula. When was this? And we'll get to it. This was in like the 1200s. And then you come back over here and you see that it spreads into Germany also, tremendously prolific. And we see these are the dates. You have an idea of what was produced in these places. So, there's an expression that the olive only gives oil when it's crushed. And so the metaphor is for the Jewish people as well, as that we are squeezed and we're being squeezed now. So let's see, those who can plug into what we're doing, it's the best thing. The Jews of England up to the expulsion. That's what we're talking about. Expulsion? What? Wasn't King David, what was his name? The Lion-Hearted, King Richard the Lion-Hearted? Wasn't he the best thing ever happened? So he writes like this, Dr. BEINART. The histories of the Jews in England in the 13th century can be described as one of persecutions and oppressions by the state and the population at large. The state and the English church had from the beginning intended to convert the Jewish community to Christianity, and for this purpose a home for converted Jews, which was called a Domus Conversorum, was established in London in 1232. The tax policy towards the Jews was one of merciless exploitation. King Edward, 1272 to 1307, approved the church's attempts at converting Jews. Many towns expelled the Jews, while others received privileges permitting them not to tolerate the Jews. Now, what is that? I would thought they would say the opposite. They don't have to tolerate. Leicester was the first to receive such a privilege in the year 1231. So the Jews moved to towns owned by Edward I after being expelled in 1275 by Eleanor, the Queen Mother, from the towns in her possession. However, local expulsions did not cease. In 1275, Edward I issued a decree, Statum de Judaismo, in which he endeavored to change the occupations of his Jewish subjects from money lending and usury to crafts and agriculture. The attempt failed because by that time the Jewish community was completely impoverished. Pressured by the townspeople, he ordered the archai, chirograph checks, I don't know what they are, but apparently these were containing records of their debts to the Jews to be closed. It soon became clear that there was nothing left to extort from the Jews. Now think of Robin Hood. On 18 July 1290, Edward issued an edict for the banishment of the Jews from England by the beginning of November. The Jews were allowed to take only their personal possessions. Now, I don't know, does this sound familiar? The rest of their property was confiscated. To replace the loss of income, the Crown was authorized by Parliament to levy a tithe on ecclesiastical property and a 15% tax on the property of the nobles and citizens. These taxes were but a pittance in comparison to those paid by Jews 100 years earlier. So they kicked out the Jews. They lost a source of income because they were busy robbing the Jews. The number of Jews expelled has been estimated at 4,000, and most of them going to France and Ashkenaz. Now, it's really important to understand that Jews were in the money lending business because the Catholic Church at that time did not allow interest on loans. And kings and royalty who had big expenses always had trouble paying their debts, and they couldn't borrow money from anybody but Jews. And they paid very high interest. But on the other hand, why? Because at a moment's notice, they could say, well, I'm canceling the debt. And I could kick out the Jews too. Now, this happened all throughout medieval Europe. And that's why the subject of this series here is how the Jews survived the Middle Ages, because it's a challenge. Now let's look down here a little bit closer. Let me see if I can get this lined up right. So this is an example right here of written in Hebrew, a Hebrew quitclaim of Josie, son of Elias, Josie, son of Moses, and Judah the Frenchman. So what is a quitclaim? Quitclaim means a deed. H. Lowe, Stars, and Jewish Charters. He says that's where you found it. It's right now in the British Museum. Aren't they wonderful people? So going back here, because we speak English and they are the people of our heritage. We love Robin Hood. We hate King John. And we love good old Richard the Lion-Hearted, except if you were Jewish. So he writes like this: William of Blois, Bishop of Worcester, forbids Jews to employ Christians as servants or wet nurses, to accept sacred vessels as security for loans, and to earn interest on monies received from Christians. He forbade this. This is in the year 1219. Now let's go to the next one. You got to look around to see where they're at. Here's one down here. We get it down here in the lower part of England, see where we're at. And number 2, in the year 1232, a synagogue was confiscated by king and converted to a church. Oh, there's nothing new about that. Number 3. Here's number 3 over here. Parliament of Jews, representatives of recognized Jewish communities, are summoned to levy a tax of £14,000. Number 4. In the city of Oxford, students attack the Jews of the town in the year 1244. He says, Jews obliged to wear an identifying badge and forbidden to build synagogues. That's in the same place in Oxford. Now let's find number 6. Where is number 6? Here it is, up here. So pointing at this place called Worcester or Worcester. Here we pronounce it Worcester. So Jews forbidden to engage in usury. That's in 1275, which was the business there was money lending. But they are allowed to reside only in towns owned by the king, obliged to wear identifying badge from age 8, and to pay taxes from age 12. Let's find number 7. I got a little trouble finding number 7. There's number 8. There's number 1, 6, 3, 4, 5, 9, 2, 7. Oh, I misread it. The 17th of November, 1278, in London, around London, there were mass arrests and execution of Jews. Number 8. In the year 1287, all Jewish heads of family arrested and held hostage until the payment of £20,000 ransom. Number 9, I think this is the last one. Newport. He says, 18 July, let me see, I've got to get this back up here a little bit. There we go. 18 July 1290, Edict of Banishment compels Jews to leave England by the 1 November under punishment of death. Jews permitted to take or sell their possessions. Jewish houses and synagogues were destroyed. So that's the 13th century, ready old England, our lovely English ancestors for this culture of this culture. Anyway, this is Baruch Fleischman. You've been listening to the Tikkun Elevator Kollel.